You're welcome. Thanks for joining on this edition. We are coming to you live from our studios in Kokomlemle on digital TV and DSTV channel 421, Go TV channel 144. The details now. The special prosecutor Martin Amidu says his office never started investigations into allegations made against the former Public Procurement Authority boss in the Contracts for Sale documentary. The special prosecutor says this is due to the attitude of investigators who are looking into ongoing procurement malpractices at the PPA even before the president referred the matter to him. President Akufo-Addo referred the corruption aspect of the JoyNews documentary that busted the former PPA CEO for alleged sale of contracts to the special prosecutor, while the conflict of interest angle was referred to Shraj. Shraj has since completed its work, triggering criticisms against the special prosecutor for slow pace of work. Mr. Amidu says his acting head of investigations and case officer appear compromised and are delaying work on key corruption issues. He's been offering some explanations, and I'll be giving you more details of this as my colleague Winston Amwang joins us to share details of the updates from the special prosecutor. We'll also be bringing you a reaction from the citizens' movement against corruption, because there are some interesting things revealed in that update from the special prosecutor. We'll also hear from Manasseh Azuri-Awuni. He is the one who broke the story, brought it to us about the alleged corruption at the office of the Public Procurement Authority. So, Winston, tell us about this claim of compromise the special prosecutor mentions in that letter.
Well, so Mr. Martin Amidu says that, when the case was referred to him, he actually indicated to the office of the president that he had been also monitoring the situation. He called Manasseh Azuri-Awuni and told him how he had been collaborating with the Auditor General on this particular issue while commending him for the work. And so, together with team from the Audit Service and the head of investigations at the office of the Special Prosecutor and those in charge of the case, they were supposed to work on this particular issue. Now, according to the Special Prosecutor's statement on this, when the staff of the Audit Service met his team, including the head of investigations, they decided not to engage them further. They said they were not going to be part of the investigations again. So he was worried and he asked why. And they said, well, according to the Auditor General, his team said they were not going to work with these persons again. He then said, he asked his members why this situation. They didn't tell him anything. They said he knew nothing about it. And then he impressed upon the Auditor General months later. But I'll come back to that because he says, he became suspicious of the activities of these persons because they went to the office of Mr. Jenim Boateng, also went to that of Francis Ahin, and went to his home. In all of this, they spent about an hour and came back with nothing.
And sorry, we have to establish the identity of Francis Ahin and his relationship in this.
Yes, Francis Ahin is the brother-in-law of AB Ajay, that's Jenim Boateng Ajay, with whom they were working on the TDL, Talents Discovery Limited. So that's it basically with Francis Ahin. Now, Mr. Amidu, he suspected, because there were other cases that they were working on which had stalled more or less. And he mentions the National Lotteries Authority case, for instance. He says months later, he impresses upon the Auditor General to tell him why his staff decided not to work again. And they said that, well, when they met the staff of the Office of the Special Prosecutor, they told him that this was a good case which they could make a lot of money from. And Mr. Amidu says his own investigation has proven that one of his team members was in constant touch with the suspect's lawyer. And so for him, it was obvious that these investigators had been compromised. And so in effect, he never started investigation because the people who were supposed to investigate had been compromised.
All right, Winston, I'll come back to you. The reason Winston is here is for you to get more details of that 3-page letter written by Special Prosecutor Martin Amidu on why he never started investigations into the contracts for sale scandal as revealed in that documentary by Manasseh Azuri Awoni. He does mention, though, that he started doing some work before the president referred that to him. But let's talk about the bit on his staff members who he says are compromised. Have they been disciplined? Are they still working on the case? What's happening with them?
Well, they're not working on the case. But Mr. Amidu says that let nobody ask him about discipline because these are seconded staff members to his office.
Okay.
And so they are not officers that have been employed and put under his care directly. These are investigators that have been seconded from other agencies to work with him. Okay. And everybody who knows, who is supposed to know this situation, has already been told of his current situation. So let nobody come and say, why aren't you disciplining them? They are not my staff. I mean, if you look at it technically, they've been seconded to work with me. Okay.
Then this raises a lot of issues. If the office mandated to fight corruption in itself is raising issues about its staff meddling in corruptible acts. Well, there are a lot of questions to be answered, but I'll come back to you on the bit of Shraj and what he says about the Shraj report on the same contract for sale. But we've been joined by Edem Senanu. He's with the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. I appreciate your time here this morning. For you, who has been with a group champion in the fight against corruption, when you hear the special prosecutor say, for example, that no one should ask him about disciplining persons he's worked with who he alleges are involved in corruption, what goes through your mind?
Well, thank you. I think that the special prosecutor is being as blunt as he can be at this stage. Obviously, the complaints that Shraj has been able to deliver a report when he ought to have done the substantive report by now probably has speeded up his reaction. Now, we clearly have a problem with the independence and operational efficiency of the SPO. These have been compromised, and clearly so by the mechanisms put in place for him to procure the necessary labor, human resource to play the functions required of the office. I think that right at the beginning, Mr. Amidu had talked about how he needed the capacity to do his own identification, selection, and appointment of officers who he could trust. And this is just playing out to show that he was absolutely right. To the extent that he had no influence over who was seconded to him, to the extent that, and again, it is telling on the quality of the staff at the Auditor Generals that they refused to go along with these gentlemen who were saying that these are very good cases who make a lot of money. And again, it speaks to the good collaboration to the extent that the Auditor General then told him that, look, this is what my men found out about the guys in your office. I think that as civil society, as media, we ought to impress upon the government of the day to show good faith by immediately, and the presidency has that capacity to authorize Mr. Amidu to do a search and select the kind of competent staff that will allow him to swiftly deal with these cases so that we have the kind of information he can take to court and get the necessary sanctions so that we don't undermine the operational efficiency of his office.
I'm sure the question on on the minds of a lot of Ghanaians is if we would ever win this fight against corruption. Today we hear this, tomorrow the next. The creation of the Special Prosecutor's Office was supposed to be that one thing that will elevate, if I may say, or intensify the fight. But it appears that we're still at the same point.
Yes. Political systems evolve. If you look at the Western democracies that we look up to, most of them have had over 200 years of putting in place the structures and systems and processes. So we should never give up. It is only when the voices of the people are no longer being heard, then we have a challenge. And that's why we say that the cost of a thriving democracy is eternal vigilance by the citizens. We must constantly be scanning what is going on and ensuring that together we hold hands and speak up when we think that something is wrong. And with our collective influence, we can always bring change. And this is one of the areas where we need to clinically look at what has gone wrong. And clearly, it is the appointment capacity of the special prosecutor. Even then, you cannot avoid having one or two bad nuts. But the screening process where he can do a background check, test integrity in other positions that they may have occupied before allowing them to be part of his office would have served as another layer of, of checks that would have ensured higher quality in terms of the integrity of the people in this office. That has not transpired. It is a necessary thing we must change, and we should not get tired. This fight is a long battle. It's a long drawn battle, and we better not get tired about it. That's the price we have to pay to pursue a democratic governance system.
Do you get a sense that from the special prosecutors, the language he uses and his posturing, do you get a sense that he's helpless or feels helpless?
Well, in a sense, yes, because he said he had brought this to the attention of different quarters. And I'm glad, every 6 months he's supposed to report to us. I think that we as the people need to make a lot more of a fuss about this issue. He highlighted it at the beginning. He indicates he's written to the board, that is the board chair, and in other documents, the Japar report, he talked about it again. I think he's just saying that, you know what, I've been trying to engage around this issue and bring to the attention of the necessary authorities that you got to do something about the people seconded to me. I need to have people I can trust, people who have integrity. Yes, you are right, and it's up to us, the rest of Ghana, to ensure that he gets what he needs. In fact, it's a standard thing that employers must provide the tools and the support that an employee needs to be able to perform. And I think in this context, we are not doing enough, at least in this regard, to make sure that he delivers on his mandate.
Mr. Senator, I'll come back to you when we're wrapping up the conversation. Let me come back to Deputy Head of our Political Desk, Winston Amwa. Back to that statement or that update from the Special Prosecutor. He comments on the Shraj report. What does he say?
Well, he says that Shraj has done a good job. He commends them for the work they have done, except that in his view, they get his bank statements and total amounts wrong. He doesn't state how Shraj gets it wrong, but if you look at the Shraj report, you can make the deduction of 14.8 million cedis in his account. According to the bank statements, the special prosecutor attaches to this statement, it's 15.691 million cedis. Okay. So maybe that could be where we're having the disparity coming from. And so that's what he talks about Shraj's work.
Winston, let's talk to the man behind the Contracts for Sale documentary, Manasseh Azuri-Awuni. Hello, Manasseh. Thank you for joining the program this morning. So the special prosecutor mentions you in his update on the president's directive for him to investigate your documentary and the allegations made in it. And he says the reason he's not been able to invite you, even as a witness, is because the investigation has not even started at all. How does that make you feel?
Well, I have some knowledge about some of the things that we are hearing today publicly. And I'm really not surprised that this is happening because the Office of the Special Prosecutor, in my view, has not lived up to its bidding, and the reasons, some of which are there. But generally, there are two parts. The first one has to do with the preparedness of the administration, the government, to fight corruption, and also how proactive the person in charge of that office is. And from both angles, I think they fall short of the right standard needed to have put into practice the very things they want to do. So I'm really not surprised, but it is also disheartening that after 1 year, it took about 2 months to do this investigation. And I always say that with state institutions, they can even do it better and faster because they have the power to summon people to come and answer questions and all of that, which we, the investigative journalists, don't have. So one would have expected them to have completed. I'm saying this because I know that the bank accounts and its statements, those details were made to or available to the Office of the Special Prosecutor for more than a year now. So if they have still not been able to even call the person to interrogate him, they also have a list of the people who pay the money into this account. If all of that has not happened after a year, then it is very disheartening.
Manasseh, in his statement, he mentions that Shraj may have got some figures wrong with regards to the euro and dollar accounts that Mr. ABAJ was using. Do you have a reaction from Shraj on that?
Well, before Martin Amidu came out, I knew that the figures were wrong. And if you listen to the comment I made on News File, I said I was surprised that the figure was that low. So I reached out to Shraj, and the information I was given was that they made a specific request to the office that is in charge of this Financial Intelligence Center to give them specific information that auspicious payments that were made into the account. So this is what they got from the Financial Intelligence Center. So it is possible that the Office of the Special Prosecutor and the Auditor General may have broadened their scope, and that's why they may have gotten this figure. But I must also say that in matters such as this, we should be looking more than what we have found in the account, because all these, from my experience investigating corruption, these bribes are so huge and they are not paid in check, they are paid cash. It is also possible that some of these monies may have been used by the recipient without taking them into the bank. They may have just used them to buy property here and there. So there's that possibility. What we have may not be the exclusive or the exhaustive list or amount that went into it. So if this investigation was to continue and done properly, I'm sure more monies or properties may have been found beyond what we have in this account.
Finally, before you go, Manasseh, you talk about the fact that this has been 1 year coming, and it's quite disappointing for you that we're still at this stage with this case. But there are many other investigations you've conducted, and there seems to be no punishment for offenders or even no case heard at all. What keeps you moving? What keeps inspiring you to keep doing what you do? You've done one recently on the FDA.
Well, my duty as a journalist is to shine the light on the things that are not right, with the hope that they will be corrected. If you look at the Constitution, it says we should hold the government accountable to the people. So I'm supposed to do my part, which I consider a calling. I must say it takes a lot of pains to do this work. You just heard that the prosecutors or investigators have been compromised. I tell you, these people who are engaged in this have so much money that they can afford to pay anything. If somebody is keeping about 41 million cedis, they can equally use 5 or 6 million cedis to bribe somebody to get off their back so that they can continue to even make more. So if you decide to turn your back to all these inducements, put yourself and your family at risk, and then you finally bring out the facts, and then those who are supposed to act on it don't do it, it can be really, really, really saddening. But I take solace in the fact that the exposure alone gives some level of action or effect and deterrence, because not everybody would want to be in the shoes of Mr. ABAJ as we speak now. Not everybody would want to be in the shoes of the FDA lawyer as we speak now. And perhaps not everybody would want to be in the shoes of Just Bond, because this was a person who was considered whatever. But with time, there are people who are getting to know how they make their money. So I think the exposure alone would, it may not yield the needed results, but to some extent, somebody somewhere would look at it and say, well, if I don't want to get myself exposed one day like this, then let me do my things right. So I don't think this should let us lose hope, because if we are exposing all of this rot and the corruption is still happening, the question is, what would happen if we decide to keep quiet?
All right. Manasseh, I appreciate your time this morning. Manasseh Azuri-Awuni is a freelance journalist. You heard him there speaking about his work in the country relating to corruption. Let me come to you as we wrap up this conversation, Mr. Senanu. So you heard Manasseh there talk about the fact that he's aware the special prosecutor had details of Mr. ABAJ's bank account as far back as a year ago. It appears that the Shraj report and recent discussions within the media space about it may have compelled the special prosecutor to come out with this statement. Do you think he has been slow in updating us? Should this have come earlier? Or is there another way he could have gone around this in making sure that the investigation was done and done well?
The special prosecutor ought to have given us this feedback much earlier, because these are very high-profile cases that all of us have been interested in and been wondering what on earth is going on in that office that we are not seeing the light of day. I don't think that there is any other way the special prosecutor can get these things resolved except to come to the public domain where we have the most interest in ensuring that the right thing is done. And he needs to do this much more frequently than he has done in the past. In this instance, I can only foresee a situation where perhaps in terms of internal process, he requires that the investigators should have finished their job before he takes the next level. Otherwise, what Manasseh says is true, that to the extent that you have the bank statements and the volumes of money passing through were that huge, one is wondering whether the special prosecutor himself and his deputy couldn't have done some of this themselves. But I guess there are processes, and if you compromise those processes, you may be seen to be having more interest in one case than the other. Bottom line, now that this information is out, two things. One, special prosecutor should be minded that the people of Ghana have not been happy with this long delay. It should not have taken charge report coming out, which again was at the instigation of Manasseh's comments during his speech. That also triggered charges within 48-hour release. And now also, we shouldn't have the situation where media and journalists supported by civil society must create the environment before they do the tasks assigned to them. That's unfortunate. More importantly, will the government take the bull by its horns and ensure that this office has the capacity to search, identify, and appoint the men and women who have the kind of integrity to perform the functions that fulfill the mandate of the Special Prosecutor's Office? That's key.
Grateful you could join us this morning. Adam Senanu is co-chair of the Citizens Movement Against Corruption. And earlier you heard Manasseh Azuri-Awuni, freelance journalist. I've been in the studio with Deputy Head of our political desk, Winston Amwa. He brought us details of the Special Prosecutor's update on the contracts for sales scandal. But it appears, Winston, that quite recently the Special Prosecutor has had to come sort of to the public to try and initiate a certain conversation around matters he's investigating.
Well, exactly, Ben, is because, corruption is one thing we've talked about so much in this country. And when Mr. Martin Amidu was appointed as special prosecutor, the joy in many Ghanaians was because he'd been an anti-corruption campaigner. And so if you've been in office for more than 2 years and lots of the things that, and the expectations from people were so high, it's important you tell us what you have done. And that's why you see lots of people asking questions of the special prosecutor. It's good he's coming out now, but I agree with, Adam Senanu. Maybe he could have come up earlier. So he could have told us, you know what, this is what I have found out so far. If he had done that, this conversation of having his own team of investigators, would have been had long ago. It's late, but it's better late than never.
I appreciate your time. Deputy Head of our political desk, Winston Amwa. Then that's how we'll wrap up this conversation for now. But definitely you'd expect more discussions around it on this channel.